you tell. Oh, okay. I guess we are. All
We
right.
are live.
Okay. Yeah, I see.
Okay.
I
See you
actually.
later.
Okay. See you later. Okay, that was our producer, Laura. All right, so it's Jack and Charles here on More to Consider. We're live today, and we're going to discuss whatever comes to mind here or whatever we want to think about. Charles, how are you, brother?
I'm doing all right yourself.
I'm doing okay. It's rainy here in Virginia, cold probably everywhere in Virginia, but it's definitely in the area I'm in right now. The weather has turned pretty nasty. Fall, I don't know. I mean, it's getting to be about November, so I would guess it is supposed to get somewhat cold and nasty. And
Yeah,
you are, how's your recovery going? Your recovery getting any better there?
I'm doing okay, honestly.
Sure.
That those Wolverine genes are really starting to come through right
Now
now.
be careful with the gene thing, okay? Because we're right back to where we were a couple months ago. Do you mean you in this term? You're not talking about genes that you wear that you're getting paid
No,
extra money. Okay, you're talking
no.
about genetics.
Yes, genetics.
And
It's
you have Wolverine genetics, which makes you or helps you, assist you, and
in my
healing
recovery.
quickly. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So other than that, I'm doing okay. It's just a little sore, but that's what happens when your skin is healing.
Gotcha.
Yeah, you can't really help it. So no, other than that, I'm doing okay.
All right, so here we go. We on More to Consider. It's been all over the place. I do a lot of sports, do a lot of history. I am an attorney, do a lot of politics. You're a big politics guy. You've certainly been you study a lot, that's for sure. We have many great conversations about, our views on things for people that are listening here, that are listening live, that have questions for us. To try to maybe remove any kind of mystery. We're both very libertarian types. We both see a proper function of government as being very limited. So with that in mind, just kind of kicking it off, sort of where we are both politically. What's your big thing in the news today?
Well, food stamps.
Uh-oh.
Yeah,
All right.
I think it's about to be a mess. Kind of, sort of. With this government shutdown, well, let's go back to the big, beautiful bill.
Okay.
And one of the things that was in the big, beautiful bill was the federal government clamping down on who was eligible for food stamps, EBT or SNAP, whatever you want to call it. And I shouldn't say it that way. I'm sure there's a difference between them, but for just purposes of this conversation, I'm just going to use the term synonymously. But in the big, beautiful bill, yes, they were going to determine who was actually eligible for it, and they just weren't going to throw food stamps out to people just because they claimed they needed them.
Right.
There was going to be some minimum requirements, and one of those minimum requirements was that if you were a person who can actually work, then you need to get your behind out there and go work. We're just not going to give it to you, in perpetuity. Just not going to happen. So there are people who are having an issue with this. And generally it's people who mostly women, obviously, who have kids. And a lot of them have 3 or 4 or 5 kids. And them having these kids, the federal government pretty much has set up a situation, or so say, a system that it discourages women from getting into long-term meaningful relationships with men, or a person, I shouldn't just say men, with a person, because if they do, then that income, the person's income will go towards their total or the household's income, and their benefits could be actually cut off.
Right.
And this has been going on for several decades. And a lot of people have made this point that that's one of the issues with the Black community, is that it discouraged Black families from getting together because of the handouts, for lack of better words, the handouts that the federal government was given to women just to have kids. And if you remember I think it was the contract with America back in the 90s, that was one of the
94. Yeah.
One of the big issues is that the federal government, or at least Congress, had passed that, hey, we're not going to give you more money just because you start having more kids. But that was a policy prior to that. Well, now it's, we're not going to give you money if you can actually go out and work. Why is that a problem? that you go out and get a job. Well, again, people are having a fit about this. Like, who's going to take care of my kids? Maybe you, or maybe your family. I could go on and on and on about this.
All right. To me, this is a little bit about, we are on the highway and we keep running off the road, and you identify that there's issues with the steering, there's issues with our tires, there's issue with all types of mechanisms that are built into the car to maintain proper lane on the highway. Like, we're that far down the road and we're looking at, some would say, the law of unintended consequences. So we go back to the 1960s and we look at a lot of the war on poverty, the Great Society, Lyndon Johnson. I mean, that's where a lot of it goes back to.
Right.
Agreed? Fair. Right.
Yes.
So a talking point often that's attacked by the left, by the media, etc., that they feel that many people on the right say, which you just addressed, is this issue of, has it injured the Black community? Has it injured people that are of a certain income level in the first place? And this, like I said, sort of law of unintended consequences. If you set up a system and say, you have a child, you get X. You have 2 children, you get Y. If you have 3 children, you get Z. I mean, you just keep right on down the alphabet, circle back and come back to the front. So it would appear on the face, hey, the more kids I get, the bigger check I get. I mean, if that's the system. Then if you also lay on that, oh, and by the way, if you bring a breadwinner into the house, you don't get any of it, or it is going to be massively reduced.
Right.
If that's true, then one could say that it's possible that a woman with children might say, well, I don't mind if Steve or Jim or Henry or whatever hang around and maybe we make some more babies or whatever, but he damn sure can't stay here, and I surely can't marry him. That would be the argument. And I will say this. Years ago, and Lord knows Thomas Sowell has written plenty about this, but years ago, I was at Old Dominion University and I heard Dr. Walter Williams speak. Now, he passed away at the age of 84 here a few years ago. Very interesting guy. Served in the military, drove taxis at one point, ended up getting a PhD in economics, and he taught at George Mason University in Virginia. And he used to sit in for Rush Limbaugh, and the guy was hysterical, but he was your classic libertarian type, no doubt. And that's just who he was. And he didn't start off that way. As many people who become libertarian types, free market types, they generally start off differently. And then they have a light show go off and go, oh, man, that's not working. So anyway, this is what happened. He's talking about how we needed to get government out of our lives. And then we have a moderator there at Old Dominion who is reading questions from the audience. And speaking of that, please, if you're listening to this live, you want to say, attack anything Charles and I are saying, or you got a question, or you want to chime in, get it to us on X. We'll read it. We'll answer your question or give whatever thoughts we have. But back to Dr. Williams. So he makes he's making statements about what is wrong with the government taxing the sum to potentially feed, clothe, even educate others. Is that really a function of government? Is government not more about the protection of individual rights, and you don't have a right to someone else to provide you food, et cetera? So he's kind of going into that. So when the moderator goes through the questions, either all of them are coming from the extreme left because there's no one else going to Old Dominion, or he's shuffling through the cards to make sure he gets the most provocative questions he can. So someone asked him, hey there, Dr. Williams, you talking all this cutting programs. How are you going to feed all these people? And how are you going to do all this with you taking away government? And he gets kind of upset. I'll never forget this. He kind of gets upset and he goes, well, whoever wrote that, you have to answer me this. Why is it just before World War I, 50 years out of slavery, the rate of illegitimate births among blacks was lower than whites? And Sowell has addressed this. And he says the reason why there was no welfare state, that coming out of slavery, the one thing that the black community had that was strongest was church and family. Like that was it. So having this opportunity to maintain family structure, they weren't about to let it go. So he goes, really, and you think about it, without any type of welfare state, who are the only people that could really afford a child out of wedlock? Think about it. Who would it be? The affluent.
Right. I was about to say wealthy people. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the only ones that could afford it. So you did have women that came from less income or less wealth, give the child up for adoption. Abortion really wasn't as much of an issue in 1914 when he said that, but it was really interesting. He said, here we have a community of people that have a lower rate of illegitimate births at that time in American history than other demographics, other ethnicities, etc. Then you fast forward to 1960, it's still very solid. The family, the family within the black race, within the black community in the United States. Then you have the Great Society, and now you have, you hear these numbers up to 3/4 of black children are growing up without two parents. I've heard 80 in the inner city, used to be 60 other, but whatever those numbers are, we all know it's pretty high, but it's also extremely high among whites. It has skyrocketed among whites as well as blacks. So what Soul has addressed is, what he has said is that, or what I'll just go back to what Dr. Williams said that night. He looked at that person and goes, why don't you tell me? Do you think it's because this breakdown in the American family, especially among blacks? Do you think that that's because of not enough government or too much government? So I just lay that out to say, this is an argument. I know we're talking about food stamps now, but we're talking about this greater dynamic of the absolute dependence by groups of people. And I don't mean groups of people. I mean, it's like large numbers of people of whatever particular race, background, region of the country. I think a lot of people, if we polled today, just right out, do you think it's a function of government to feed people? Or do you think it should be left to charity and the churches? So I lay that background out. All right, let me read something real quick here too. The controversy surrounding food stamps or the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, often involves debates over funding cuts, eligibility requirements is what you opened with, and the political messaging associated with the program. Recent discussions have highlighted potential funding shortages due to government shutdowns and proposed cuts that could significantly impact low-income families relying on this assistance. Now, that's another issue. That term right, or that statement right there. Have we not created, I say we collectively as a society, we may have created a level of dependence that it's not fair to just pull it from people.
Well,
all right, Charles, you want to respond?
Yeah, it was actually a couple of, I need to go back a little bit. So with this issue that we're dealing with today or right now, with the people really being concerned about the benefits being taken away.
Right.
What I have seen is there's a group of people that's not being honest when it comes to this. I just watched a quick excerpt of our Governor Youngkin saying that we're going to continue those benefits because technically those benefits come from the federal government through the state and then from the state to the individual. It doesn't come straight from the federal government. And what he's saying is we're just going to continue doing what we're need to do pretty much for our citizens, regardless of what the federal government is going to do. Now, that's what he said.
Right.
Our friends north of the border in Maryland, their governor said, well, see, it's all the Republicans' fault that you people are not going to get your benefits. It's a difference in, I could just say, how it's being explained. One governor is saying we're going to take care of our people. Now, again, we're libertarians. I understand, our position on this, but he's at least saying we're going to take care of our people. And then the other one is saying, no, we might take care of you, but if you don't get taken care of, it's the federal government's fault. Like, wait a minute. But the money's coming from the federal government going to the state of Maryland. And the state of Maryland is then, dispersing the funds to the individuals. Why
Right.
can't the state of Maryland say, well, maybe we're going to have to cut back on something else and then give the money to the people, essentially food stamps to the people, because that's what the governor of Virginia has said. We're going to do some shuffling, or go into a surplus and find a way to do it, and not really continue to point fingers. Because really, if there's anybody who has a room to point the finger, it's Governor Youngkin of Virginia, because he could say, well, it's because of the Democrats in the Senate that all of this is happening in the first place. They could say that. But we still have to go back to the big, beautiful bill.
Yeah.
And in that big, beautiful bill, they decided to cut back on a lot of these welfare programs and so on and so forth, because they're realizing that there were a lot of people who were ineligible to be in the system, but were getting benefits that they didn't
Qualify for.
qualify. Didn't qualify for,
Yeah.
such as illegal aliens.
Right.
You know, a lot of this goes back to the illegal aliens thing, unfortunately, and how much of a draw that they were on the system. And I've heard people say, yeah, but they pay taxes. Yeah, I understand that they pay taxes, but they were still a draw on our system overall.
Right.
And to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars a year. They weren't paying hundreds of billions of dollars in taxes. They weren't doing that, but they were drawing hundreds of billions of dollars from the system. And another thing
Right.
about the illegals being here, they say, well, but they are a benefit to our society for the fact that they work, albeit on the table, they work, and then they spend money in the community. When you look at how much of the money that they make, that they were actually sending back home, they never really saw any benefit within our community. Again, you have to say, why are we benefiting them? Or why are we trying to extend these benefits to them when even when they get paid, they're sending their money offshore? That's what they're doing. So again, I'm terribly sorry for the people who are terribly sorry for the people who are on food stamps right now that potentially could have it cut off. But I don't think that it's really going to be cut off unless there's a governor of the state that they live
Right.
in who decides not to give them their benefits.
If somebody were a neutral party, hearing what you just said, using that example of two states on the East Coast that actually border each other, what you're saying in effect is, and we talked about this on one of our recorded shows, I think yesterday, not in a live setting, but there is this whole discussion on there have been government shutdowns before. This is now the second longest, is what we saw yesterday, October 1, 2. Now today we're October 28. So it's approaching a month, a full month. And I think it's number 2 in history for time. So you have a government shutdown. It's not a new thing. We discussed in yesterday's show how the media even seems to be going after the Democrats a little bit. And we got into the reasons maybe why. But every time in my lifetime, and really last 2-3 decades, if it started sniffing of a government shutdown, the media led the chorus of the nasty Republicans, and you never really saw what might have been underlying their opposition to pushing a bill through to continue to fund the government. There was always something nasty, there was always something dirty at the crossroads. So on this particular case, the way it has been pushed in the media, the attempt for and again, some of this media stuff's backing up, but the push is always Republicans are mean, nasty people that want you to starve to death, and they want Granny to starve to death and not get her medications or whatever. So that's always the spin. Maybe that's starting to unravel a little bit in common culture, but this thing of the idea that people have that there may be a massive number of people that cross the border, especially in the last term or the last administration, and could be potentially receiving this. And another thing too is, and I think you probably saw this, it was on a particular network who doesn't lean left, and a gentleman had a senator on. And one of the gentlemen on this network said, well, you know that a lot of people in your party support the funding of those undocumented people receiving these benefits. No, they've never done that. So then he pulls the clip
Right.
I guess it would have been the 2020
Democratic
Democrat,
presidential debate.
debate.
Yep.
And I remember how sheepish certain ones were about the raising the hand. Because, okay, here's the question. Here's the premise. I'm going to throw it out there. How many of you are for government funding of all these, benefits to people here illegally? And, like one hand, and then they all. So he's saying, hey, there are these leaders. She was like, well, I've never heard anybody prominent in the party. So pretty much 14 people that were trying. Yeah. Okay. So we all kind of know how much bullshit that is. So anyway, it's interesting now that you say that there may be mechanisms for the state to take the brunt, at least for the time being. Maybe there's a reimbursement of funding somehow, because the money's freed back up from the government. But it seems like what you're saying is Youngkin is saying, okay, we'll bite the bullet and make sure you continue to get your benefits. It's a federal program that passes through the state. So we're going to take on that burden until this thing ends. But the Maryland guy, according to what you're saying, is like, no, you're going to suffer, and I'm going to blame it on the Republicans. Fair? That's a fair assessment. Well, it sounds like to me that's pretty good politics. If all you're in it for is politics, it's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, remember I can't remember which Democrat said this not too long ago, the past few days, that they're using the federal employees who have been furloughed as leverage. That literally came out her mouth.
Wow.
And saying something like that has caused AFGE. AFGE is a federal government union. It is the American Federation of Government. Oh my goodness, employees. That's what it is. AFGE. They came out yesterday, and now they're going after the Democrats, saying, "Hey, you guys need to go ahead and vote for this." What is the bill called? I'm sorry, I'm at a loss for words right now. The resolution where it's a clean bill. Yes, you need to go ahead and vote for the clean bill and open up the federal government, because you're really, really affecting the other federal government employees. To have a union say that is really weird. Or should I say it's weird? It's really, it's important for a union to say that, especially the largest federal government union in the country, to go after the people that really they support the most, which are the Democrats, saying you guys need to get off your ass and vote for this bill to open the government back up. That was really interesting to see. So not only is it the alphabet news agencies that are going against, or should I say turning on the Democrats for not voting for this bill or any of these bills, because I think that's the 13 now that they voted down. But the unions are saying it now. Okay, how many other Democrat strongholds are going to turn on them before they realize that, okay, fine, we're going to have to do this? But they're not going to, I'm not going to say they're not going to do it. They're going to have a hard time doing it because of their, severe TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, whereas they just cannot give the guy a win, regardless of who it hurts, whether it be their own constituents. They're not going to, they're going to go kicking and screaming. Those senators literally are going to go kicking and screaming. And by the way, it only requires how many of them? 7 or 8 of them to do this, and they still won't do it. Okay, we got a real problem.
Yeah, when you bring up TDS and things like that, though, I still think it's all performance art. I don't believe in any of it. I don't believe. I mean, I'm not saying these people don't say what they say, but you remember when, and I don't know what it was, the Kathy Griffin, when she did the severed head thing with Trump, then they unearthed the pictures maybe a decade before. She's on a golf course with her arm around him. And, and I actually saw somebody the other day pulled out a 15 or so years ago, The View. Everyone's in love with them. Everyone, so that whole light switch flipping, and I don't know what any of it is. I really don't. I just don't think any of it's real. And when I mean, I don't think any of it's real, I don't think their animus towards him is real. I don't think that they loved him that much when they seem to like him on The View. They're all performers. They perform. It's all acting. I mean, and it carries whatever message. But like, I think of politics, and this is not, it's not unique to me to say this. It's worldwide wrestling. It's the wrestling stuff from the 80s and 90s. It's Hulk Hogan and the crew, whatever. That's all this is. And then you people like their particular team. They like their particular wrestler. So they like what they like. And then if you try to talk to them like, no, but Democrats good, but Republican, whatever, but again, it misses the point that I think you and I would make. And this is why I just think it's all theater, and it is what it is. Again, and I use this term, the law of unintended consequences. When government does things it's not designed to do, it's not its function, it's going to screw it up. And it's going to screw it. It's going to screw up in waves, and it's going to screw up in matters of degree.
Right.
And that's what happens. And then when people are throwing up their hands, and okay, in Virginia right now too, one of the politicians running for one of the 3 upcoming seats. Oh, well, there's actually multiple seats in the House of Delegates, Senate, whatever. But in the 3 major, attorney general, lieutenant governor, and governor, there was an attack the other day on one of the candidates for questioning public education. And I saw him on you see, now you know who it is because everyone else is running. Well, it's the one running for lieutenant governor because everybody else is running is female. I think everybody's running. Well, except for the Democrats. But on the Republican side, it's right. No, it's 2 males and a female. I'm sorry. Anyway, it's the one, not the attorney general, but he's on there and he has a Northern Virginia woman on. Okay. And he was being attacked as if he had resurrected Hitler, the Third Reich. I mean, because he said so, but she said, what's going to happen to our children if we don't educate them? And he was like, I'm saying outside of Northern Virginia, where the schools tend to be a little bit better, or maybe even quite a bit better, if you look at funding of education and the result we get when there's such a high percentage of kids who can't read and write, what are we doing? So what if we went to other models where, charter schools or vouchers, any kind of school choice, and this is really 3rd grade, but it makes a lot of sense. I used to say this when I was teaching in college. I was like, hey, what kind of hamburger you like? Wendy's, Whataburger, you go to the West Coast, of course, In-N-Out, but you name a burger. Why? And I said, anytime you go get a burger, most likely you're weighing taste, quality versus cost. Sometimes you get the cheaper burger, but you have a hamburger choice, and you have a hamburger choice, and then you walk with your feet to wherever, and you vote with your dollars, which hamburger you like the most. So imagine you have a monopoly on education. How much incentive do you have to be any good? You really don't have a lot. So the whole argument is, if you're saying that the cost of taxation money is used towards educating little Charles at or $18,000 a year, 21,000, whatever. How about we hand your family that money and you go shopping around? So this lady's attacking him, saying, well, you only want the rich kids to get the better education. He goes, no, I'm saying the model we're using doesn't work. Now, of course, what is the group with the greatest strength and opposition to any type of school choice? Who is it?
Teachers unions.
You got it.
Yeah.
And do they heavily fund certain candidates with certain letters in front of it? Yeah. So we know who they are. Well, of course they're against it. But it was the religious fervor of the woman attacking him that I found so interesting. I mean, she was downright, these children, they have to be educated. And you don't want, no, lady. I didn't say I don't want them not to be educated. The system's not working. And I just thought, wow, he was attacking a tenet of a religion.
Yes.
It was clear because she's supposed to be an objective journalist sitting in some studio in Northern Virginia. And I mean, her feathers were ruffled. She was upset. Now, maybe some of that show, given what I said earlier, a lot of that was probably show too. But I don't know how we live in a world where someone couldn't question the efficiency of public education and it become. So where I'm going with this is a church. The government is a church. And of course, a part of it is this church education. Teach the little kids to be good citizens within, good constituents, whatever. So an attack on the education is an attack on the church. Go ahead.
Yes, that's true. But honestly, what they're using is, I hate to say this, but it is what it is. They're using, and I don't mean this to be disrespectful, but they're using, and I hate to say this, but it is what it is. They're using, and I hate to say this, but it is what it is. They're using, and I hate to say this, but it is what it is. They're using, and I hate to say this, but it is what it is. They're using, and I hate to say this, but it is what it is. They're using, and I hate to say this, but it is what it is. They're using, and I hate to say this, but it is what it is. They're using, and I hate to say this, but it is what it is. They're using, and I hate to say this, but it is what it is. They're using, and I hate to say this, but it is what it is. They're using, and I hate to say this, but it is what it is. They're using, and I hate to say this, but it is what it is. They're using, and I hate to say this, but it is what it is. They're using, and I hate to say this, but it is what it is. They're using, and I hate to say this, but it is what it is. They're using, and I hate to say this, but it one of the things about the Catholic Church
Mm-hmm.
is that they essentially for centuries have said that if we can get you by the time you're 6 years old, we have you for the rest of your life.
Okay.
And I think that the teachers unions and
Oh yeah, they're doing the same thing. Yeah.
they're doing the exact same thing.
Yeah. Well,
If we
I'm
can
sure
get you
that
by
you.
6 years old.
Yeah, it's the use of the same model. But I will say this, however unpopular, say something in the comments if you like. I've been around a lot of people, and I have to say, as a group of people, when I think of the people I know that are the best logical thinkers, they grew up in the Catholic Church schools. They grew up in the Catholic schools. Have you not had a similar experience? Now, a lot of them
Pretty much.
rejected the Catholic Church, believe me. A lot of them were,
Yes.
yeah, I listened to it growing up and all that. But the discipline and the model that they used in the formation of their education, the model used to teach the kids, that they were always the best logical thinkers I would ever run across. They certainly were being indoctrinated, probably in some sense, as to the church for sure. But they were also being taught at some level how to think, which ironically, and we have a close friend that I'm thinking of when I say this, it was probably the very training, although this person's just innately intelligent and you would have figured it out himself. But he said that what was interesting is the very way that they taught me to think is what led to me to rejecting the church and think it was all,
Right.
kind of hocus pocus. But I still got a great education by being in that. Now, I had another friend. Again, this is all anecdotal, doesn't mean a thing. You could do a study, prove it, disprove it. I had a friend of mine that was 5 years in Catholic church, Catholic schools, I should say. Sorry. Then her father was military. They get transferred somewhere. Boom, she's in a public school. So she's starting the 6th grade. And she said literally, she thought everyone was a second and third grader where they were. It was frightening.
Mm-hmm.
Like she gets in there like, whoa. I covered that extensively in the 3rd grade. And now I'm in the 6th grade and so the shock to her system of going into public education, having come from the Catholic schools, but that's a lot of private schools too. And Thomas Sowell addressed this years ago with William F. Buckley. He was on, you may have seen this, it was famous. It was early 80s. I think it might have been 1980. And there was kind of the old liberal white lady on there telling him what's what about the systems. And he said, I can show you a lot of older black ladies who are domestics and they clean as many homes as they can, or they work side jobs so their kids can go to Catholic school. Because the woman was saying, you can't leave it to certain demographics to decide where their kid goes to school. She literally says that. And he goes, I think some of the best people to decide where their kids go to school are the parents of the kids. Well, you can't trust them because they're not educated. She literally says it. Well, they're not educated. And then he said, believe me, there's a model where a lot of people who were low income found ways to put their kids in better schools. Go ahead.
Well, this has been going on for quite some time. And there was this chart that came out just a few weeks ago, had to do with the Illinois State Board of Education, schools with 0 students scoring proficient on the IAR. I'm not exactly sure what that is, or SAT in 2024. And it's about 2 dozen. I just sent you the chart.
Yeah. Okay.
About 2 dozen schools. The vast majority, all but 3, are in the Chicago public school system.
Right.
And 0 students proficient in reading. 0. But what's so interesting about that is, including I think it was the superintendent. Oh, no, the the teachers union president within the city of Chicago,
Right.
her herself sent her kids to private schools.
Well, that's been brought up plenty of times. Yeah.
And it is very interesting that the people who are in charge of educating the kids are like, I'm not having my kids educated by people like me. Well, remember that old saying, I would never join a country club who had members like me or something like that.
That would accept me. That would accept me. Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing when it comes to how these teachers in Chicago. But anyone who's ever seen the show The Wire, they tackle this, I think it's season number 4, where they tackle the school system and how terrible it was in Baltimore. And one of the reasons that they were able to tackle is because one of the writers or creators of The Wire, he left the police department. And he ended up becoming a school teacher.
Wow.
And in the show, the guy Presbolewski, the character Presbolewski, was actually based off of Ed Burns, who was one of the creators of The Wire. And it was essentially him going through what it was like for him to, first be a police officer and then go into the school system, and seeing how the teachers and administrators were like, we're just going through the motions here. There's not too much that we could do for these kids.
Right. No, that's true.
We're warehousing them. And,
That's right.
the truant officers are going out at the end of the month just to go round up kids so they're there the first day of the month. And then they can get credit for it. And then they don't care what happens to them the rest of the month. But there was a story in Baltimore, whereas this girl who graduated with honors, and she ended up being accepted to the Naval Academy. And then she gets to the Naval Academy and she's having to take remedial math and English because essentially she was illiterate. Naval Academy. And that's awfully interesting as to how, she can graduate with honors from the Baltimore City schools,
right,
but then get to the Naval Academy and they're like, no, you have remedial courses you need to go through. Okay, that's bananas to me. But also there was a guy who his son had graduated from the Baltimore City schools again. Sorry, Baltimore, I gotta pick on you, just like I would pick on Chicago or DC or whatever other school system was out there, public school system was out there. He ended up suing the Baltimore City School because he was like, they didn't do what they said they're going to do by educating my kid, and now my kid is functionally illiterate.
Yeah.
Now, but we continue spending more and more and more cash on schools. Now, I know I'm getting a little long-winded here, but I remember probably about 15, 17 years ago, I was listening to a station up in New York as I was passing through, and they were talking about New Jersey. How New Jersey at the time was spending $22,000 per pupil within the state when it comes to public schools. But then the guy asked a question. He said, well, how much do you think the average private school costs in the state of New Jersey? And come to find out, it was like $19,000.
Yeah.
So if you really think about it, when you hear people say who are on the public schools are the best thing since sliced bread, they're on that side of the argument. They say, well, part of the problem is we have too many kids in the school. I mean, too many kids in the class, and the teachers can't really give as much one-on-one interaction. They can't have as much one-on-one interaction with the children because the classrooms are so large and so on and so forth. And we don't have enough money. Now let's do some quick math here.
It's always money.
If you're saying,
that's always the argument, and I find that shocking because I just watched some political. God, I just watched political advertisements the other day, and it's all these people working the school system saying they're upset with one politician and love their politician because they're going to throw more money at it.
Well, hold on, I understood. Yeah. I hear what you're saying, but again, we'll do some quick math. If it's 10 students at $22,000 per student, so now we're up to $220,000 for those 10 students. Well, what if you gave 19 of those $1,000 to some parents to send their kid to a private school? So now we're down to 9 kids at $22,000 a year. So we're down to how much? About $200,000, $202,000, I think, $203,000, somewhere around there.
Right.
For 9 kids instead of $220,000 for 10 kids. So if you think about it, if you cut it in half and gave the money to the parents to send their kids to a private school, you technically would have more money per pupil in the class with 5 kids, and also you have a smaller class size. It's simple math here. But
when I gave the criticism I just gave about these dumbass commercials where they're talking about they need more money. I'm just saying it's ridiculous. It's always, yes, we suck. The kids can't read, but we're not getting enough money.
Right.
We're just not getting enough money.
It's always
so money. Then more money's thrown at it, and more money's thrown at it, and then the grades and the scores go down further. And
Yep.
then it's because we're not getting enough money. So then you pull something like that where maybe the private school's actually more cost effective. They're getting a better education for less. We don't hear that noise. We
No.
need more money. We
Yeah.
still need more money. It's always because it's all a grift. We know what it is,
Yeah.
and you know who's in on it. Now, by the way, too, maybe you can help me with this because it went through my mind when you were bringing that up. There was somebody, they caught a little bit of heat, but they were on the right side of the cathedral, or they were with the right church. There was a politician here a few years ago. I know it's been in like the last decade because it sticks in my mind. And they were whining. And I want to say it was at the state level. They were whining and crying about how much they love some public education. And some moderator says, like, aren't your kids in private school? And it was like, it's none of your business. Remember, there was
Right.
a
Yes.
response once
Yeah.
from a candidate that it was none of your business where my kids go to school.
I remember
And
that.
it was kind of like, well, you're an advocate for all this funding and all this extra taxation on, the electorate. So why isn't it their business what you do with your own kids? And none of your business where I send my kids to go. And I was like, yeah, that's a little bit off-putting to a lot of people probably when you're saying, I want your vote. What do you do
Right.
with your kids? None of your business. All right. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think we all kind of know what it is. Now, another thing that's an issue clearly with compulsory education is you got to do something with them. I don't know if I was talking to you. I was talking to somebody recently.
What do you mean you got to do something with them?
Well, okay. If the law says you got to have them in school through 16, they got to be somewhere. And this is what I'm getting ready to say.
Okay.
The biggest shock to me growing up, I mean, really going to school every day and wondering how it would turn out. Where I grew up, our 1 through 6, I was in I'll be honest, I was kind of with the accelerated group, so it was pretty much nice little parties before Christmas break, and everything was pretty nice and sunny, and our recesses were nice. And then I went to the 7th grade, and I had not had this experience. I knew everybody 1 through 6. We'd all gone to school together. We'd all kind of been sectioned off together, and this was what the thing was. Well, at the 7th grade level, this is where the system decided to stop promoting them no matter what. So I get in the first day of the 7th grade, and there's a guy raising holy hell that the teacher has no control over, who's 6'4". So this guy in the back that's creating all this havoc is 6'4". He's 16, or right at 16. So there was this whole thing where some pretty renegade kids, if they weren't in juvenile detention or something, they were in school and they were stuck in the 7th grade. They would not promote them, but they couldn't kick them out yet. Well, when I got older, I kind of found out more about what was happening, and it was just that. So your M1A1 average 13 or 6th grader 7th grade was 13, ish. You're 13-ish. So now you're in school with kids with 3 more years of physical development and are some rough kids. And the 7th grade, now when she got out of the 7th grade, since this is the place that they stopped them, you get to the 8th grade, things kind of normalized again. Then the school I went to, when you were a freshman, we were freshman to senior in the same school, which some people I've said from other regions, yeah, maybe you had the 9th yeah. That's a big culture shock too when you go to high school and you're a 14-year-old and there's 18-year-olds there. You're kind of going through that 3-year thing. And, you're getting knocked around the hallway or something because they're seniors. And then, of course, all that writes itself. By the time you're a junior, you're kind of one of them and not one of the ones that are being preyed upon. But I'm telling you, the hardest year of my life was the 7th grade because of the mandatory compulsory education through the age of 16. They wouldn't kick them out unless they got jail time. They were tried as an adult and got jail time. They were going to be in the school. And all they did all day was disrupt class. That's all they did. And it was about 10 of them, maybe, not as much in the female population. It was mostly male. There was like 10 guys. And they went on eventually to hit whatever mark they had to hit, 16 the next number of days, and they kicked them out of school. They went home or they went off to do whatever else they did. But yeah, so the state generally has some compulsory education requirement. This is where, we get terms like truancy and things like that. And of course, a lot of people have said, how the hell does the government tell you that you have to educate or that you have to educate in a certain way? I don't think it's a function of government at all, but it does. It's an entrapment. It brings you into the system, indoctrinates your kids. It's all part of the system. Go ahead. You were going to say something on that.
Yeah, the system in itself is just really screwed up, and it doesn't seem to be a priority of the enforcers of the system that achievement be the number one priority. They seem to care more about diversity or social adjustment and so on and so forth. But honestly, none of that stuff helps people get a job. It just doesn't. That's the whole point of going to school.
Is it?
Uh, I,
See, I've never believed that either. I have never ever been a fan of that. I've never liked the. I'm just saying, me personally, I think education is education, and it does whatever it does. A lot of times, people go to school, they major in things, and they don't get any type of degree. They don't have no type of work following, but they gain some kind of. They gain something from it that led to certain skills that might have worked in another field. But
well, that's
I'm telling you, as a community college professor, this is another problem. I'm telling you,
no.
it's a problem.
I'm
I'm telling
I'm
you, this
agreeing
is
with you though. I'm
okay.
agreeing with
Okay,
you.
how,
Yeah,
you just
but
said is to get a job.
well, the reason I say that is generally, if you perform well within the system, it puts you in a better position to get a job. Maybe I should have said it that way.
Well, okay, but
Okay,
but all right. Let me just speak on this. As a former community college professor, it drove me crazy. They're telling these 18-year-olds that have just finished high school with no idea what the hell they want to do with their life at all. You got to get in the track. And when you get into the track, it's going to be to achieve employment. Like we were actually, we were having to play numbers games to justify. I was in criminal justice. What's your number one employment option, do you think, for criminal justice degrees?
police officer.
And corrections.
Okay, yeah,
That's pretty much a
law
lot of
enforcement.
corrections
Yeah,
because we had a lot of jails around this rural area I was in. We had a lot of jails. So a lot
right.
of them went into correction, whatever, right? Okay, you throw in Ferguson, you throw in a few years later George Floyd situations. We're getting called on the car like, hey, why aren't as many kids in the program? Well, if nationally there's kind of a hatred campaign against police, rightly or wrongly, but if there is, kids don't want to be cops anymore. Like they were literally not wanting to be cops. So then it became, and this was another hard thing we had to try to get the state to understand. I was in class teaching the academic side of law enforcement. I'm not teaching them how to conduct felony stops. I'm not, teaching them how to get people down on the ground or cuff them or whatever. That's not what I'm doing. That's not what we were teaching. And some states, including one very close to us, have melded those together. All of your police training is in the community college system. We have an academy in Virginia which teaches the law enforcement side. So the kid that comes in to get the criminal justice degree is getting a leg up on knowing some of the nuts and bolts of the academic side of it. Now, which I always enjoyed was students would come back like, hey, I was in the academy. And when they started talking about that Fourth Amendment stuff, search and seizure, stopping a car and all that, man, all that stuff the stories you told, because I told them stories of being a prosecutor. I'm like, okay, what can get you in trouble when you're out there on the street? How can you lose a case? How can you have a good case? Let me just give you a quick example. This is what I was teaching. I was in a particular city, and I'm going to ask you if you can tell me what's wrong with this. There was a group of detectives, and they knew very well bad guy was riding in front seat of car, and he always had drugs, and he's riding with girlfriend. They pull her over for, I think your brake light's out or something, they pull her over for whatever reason. They pull her over, and I never understood why this was true, but they pull her over and they go, okay, this is just a warning. Here is your license and registration. You verbally say that. Why? What have you just informed them? If I hold your license and registration, what are you clearly not free to do?
Leave.
Right. So I say, hey, here's your license and registration. What are you free to do?
Leave.
Then they say, this is all consent. Hey, you mind if we tear your car apart, cut your tires open, turn your seats around? Sure. Why the hell she said yes, I have no idea. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the guy in the front seat, the target of the stop, basically, one of the cops says, I need you to get out of the car and stand over there. I need you to get out of the car and stand over there. They open the glove compartment, drugs just fall into the floorboard. They then cuff him and detain him and take him to a vehicle. When they put him in the vehicle, he asked one of the cops, like, hey, what's going on? He goes, we found contraband in the car. Sit tight. We'll inform you what's going on in a minute. She's the operator of the vehicle. Glove compartment's in front of him. The drugs are now on the floor laid out. There's drugs all over the car. Then he taps, like he elbows the glass. I guess he's cuffed, but he yells back to the officer. And then he says, hey, dude, all the drugs in the car, especially the ones in the glove compartment right in front of me, they're all mine. Don't put it on her. So now he's just basically made a confession. He's confessed to the ownership of the drugs. Defense attorney in cross-examination, in preliminary hearing. It's all felonies. So we got a preliminary hearing in Virginia. What do you think the defense attorney raises? You said, stand over there. This is the stuff I would teach him in class. What was wrong with stand over there?
It was an order.
Okay. At the time they remove him from the car because she consents to the search, is he arrested? Do you have probable cause to arrest him?
Yes.
No. You just said, ma'am, can we search the car? The Supreme Court of the United States has ruled that you can remove everybody to do a search. Then they said, get out of the car and stand over there. What's wrong with that?
Oh, I don't know.
Do you think if I told you as a cop, stand over there, you're free to go?
No.
Have I arrested you yet?
No.
Then that's what the defense attorney raised. And it was a decent thing to raise. I tell you that to say the cops, the judge ends up suppressing the evidence, saying that they arrested him before they discovered the drugs. So the cops afterwards, like, gosh, Mr. Moore, man, we're terribly sorry. I'm like, it's okay. We can still directly indict him. But what should we do different next time? And I said, from now on, when you open the door, you said, sir, I need you to get out of the car. Where did I go? Do whatever the hell you want. Get out of the car. Just get out. You can order them to get out of the car. The judge picked up on, and I agree with this, but this is the kind of stuff the guys and gals said they get to the academy and they start talking about these issues and these stories would come back to them. I would teach them through. Go ahead. You got a question?
Well, but I'm actually talking about long before they get to community college, or long before they get to college. And one of the things you brought up was tracting.
Yeah, I went off on that whole thing, but what I'm saying is many of them would go through the program and realize they didn't want to be cops, and that's fine. Or they'd realize they didn't want to be correctional officers. The school is pressing because they're getting state funding and even federal funding to show your work and to show that you're putting people on the street in the jobs that they're being trained for. It's becoming that. And I don't think that's the role of college or education.
Yes, but I think
unless you're going to dental school or you're going to medical school. If you're going to a school, you're buying into, I'm going in to get an advanced degree in a field that requires this kind of a certification or this level of education to do that job.
And this is my whole point, is that this starts, in my personal opinion, junior high, middle school. That's where it starts.
That they're pushing them into some field or the other? Oh, I agree. I totally agree.
Pushing them into college when...
That too.
The thing that they really...
There should be vocational schools.
Yes, that's exactly where I was going with
this. Go make $35 an hour laying brick.
Or even better, because 35 actually is on the low end, honestly.
I was going to say... Yeah,
I remember
that's the last I heard, but yeah.
I remember seeing this guy saying that the next group of millionaires are plumbers.
Sure.
Which is true for the fact that AI is not going to be able to...
AI can't plumber, yeah.
It can't replace plumbers. So...
And you can't get an answer on the internet directly. I mean, you might be able to go on there and screw around and get a YouTube video and think you can do it yourself, but you probably screw it up.
That's right.
Work. Yeah, absolutely.
So what's happening is that's not even coming up in the conversation in the school system as to there's other ways to provide for yourself other than going through the college system.
No, because the college system is building upon itself. It is another one of these cathedral type of operations where people are getting rich off of it.
Yes, I agree.
Get as many kids. Well, I mean, they've been telling kids since they're 14, if you don't go to college, your life's over.
Well, how about this? That actually wasn't the case, because
wasn't the case that they gave that signal, or because I can tell you that's what they're telling them now. But go ahead.
No, yeah, that's what they're telling them now, but that wasn't the case all along. I remember when I was a kid, we had vocational technical schools.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
and you could go learn how to be a plumber, a mechanic, or weld.
Barber was big. Yeah, I remember that. Bricklaying, masonry. Yeah.
Now you don't have that.
Truck driving.
Yes. Now you don't have that for the fact that they're they got rid of those programs, and it's easier for them to funnel people into higher education, quote unquote higher education. But just like anything, if you say that everybody's beautiful, then
Mhm.
nobody's beautiful.
That's
If
right.
you give
Yeah, good
everybody a
point.
college degree, then essentially nobody has a college degree. Well, what ends up happening, what we have right now, whereas the college degree is worth less than it used to be worth. So now you have to get a master's degree. Well, what's going to happen when there's just a giant flood of master's degrees? Well, now you got to get a PhD.
You're absolutely right. God, and I
So
said that 30 years ago verbatim. I remember that night Bill Clinton gave a State of the Union. He goes, "And I envision an America where every young person coming out of high school will get a college education." And I was thinking, then a college education is meaningless. If 100%
yeah,
of the people have it, you just made it a high school graduation,
that's
or
exactly right.
you just made it a diploma.
Yeah.
I just thought, I know he has to be smarter than that,
Mm,
than to say that if everyone had a college education. No, I don't. I think he's plenty smart there. But again, if you have a system that 100% of the people can achieve a college degree, then how difficult is a college degree? I mean, how much does
right.
that separate you? Just by steps, you would think grade school to high school to a bachelor's degree, graduate schools ought to be at least a little bit something more selective in who they take in and what the requirements are. And clearly, now I'll tell you this too, though, law school. Law school has changed a lot. Did you ever see the movie The Paper Chase?
No,
Okay.
I've heard of it. I haven't seen it.
Well, it's basically, of course, like everything. I always shorthand to the movie, but I think in the opening of the movie, John Houseman played this professor. And let's see, gosh, who was that? Was that the actor was same one as Love Story, wasn't it? Ryan O'Neal. I think it was
Okay.
Ryan O'Neal. He was in Love Story with you give me that look, Ali McGraw. That was like the biggest movie in 1971. All right, anyway. So he goes to law school. What ends up happening is he falls in love with or gets physically involved with, sexually involved with this professor that he hates, his daughter. And he doesn't realize it till he goes to the guy's home for like a Christmas party and realizes that the girl he's been messing around with and he's been bad talking. But anyway, the point I'm making here is it's Harvard Law School and it's 1970, 71, 72, sometime that time frame. And at the beginning of it, he says, "Look to this side of you, to your right and to your left. One of you's going home at break," or something like that. It's like 2/3 passed. I mean, hell, it may have even been the 1/3 passed, but the numbers were that. So the model then was very difficult to get into law school. Very few law schools. So that, the Harvard, Columbia, Stanford, Yale, I mean, there weren't a lot of law schools. There were a lot of state law schools. Okay, let's take that back. There might have been hundreds where now there's thousands. Everybody's
Mhm.
got a law school now. But the idea was we're going to weed you out in the process. You could do, which is far above acceptable work and today in 1970, and you're failing out of law school because they literally were going to set numbers. It would be, I think it's probably the top 2/3. Top 2/3 make it. Then from out of there, you got to go challenge the bar, take the bar, etc. So that was a model. Then they started going to a customer service model. And this is what I said, it was financially driven. And it's like, okay, they're going to get a degree. They're going to come out. So now it's much easier to get through law school. They're not weeding people out the same way. They literally purposely weeded people out in the past. So now you're going to get the degree. Now your bar passage rate, you still may not ever be able to pass the bar. But I think even the bar passage rate has gone up. When I took it in 97, I think first time takers were like 70%. I think that's kind of been pretty consistent. People that read for the bar, they read under a practicing attorney for 4 years, their bar passage rate's like 30%.
Hmm.
It's never as good as going through law school because all the bar is really is how well can you take a bar school, I'm sorry, a law school type of exam. You're being taught all the way to be able to go in and write the kind of model answers they want to show that you've gone through law school and done pretty well. It's a racket as well. Don't get me wrong. It doesn't have anything to do with the practice of law, really. You learn some terms, but really the only way you practice law is do it. You do it, then you kind of figure it out. And it becomes, well, we've talked about it. If you're ever in court, you're always shocked at how informal it is. And how if you ever watched all these television shows, when they're just pulling all this law out of their head, and they seem to be so prepared, and they give these incredibly incredible speeches in court. It doesn't really happen. You got people stumbling around trying to figure out what the hell's going on in real life, because that's what it's really like.
Right.
So you get this image of what it's like, and it's not that way at all. But again, okay, law school, medical school, you're going into things like that, you're specializing. Yeah, I definitely think there has to be some type of I don't know. I mean, I guess you could still make a libertarian argument, let the market decide. If people want to hang out their shingle and say, I'm a dentist, and they're self-taught, but should there be a board of examiners? This is a question. Go ahead.
Well, regardless of what kind of degree a student gets,
Right.
I think that the number of degrees has increased so much because of one major factor. And it's the same factor that has caused the healthcare cost to go through the roof. And that would be government subsidies. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
If you have the government backing the healthcare industry, and then obviously look what we have now. I just had this happen, due to my situation here. I just had this happen where I went to get my prescription for antibiotic, and they had an insurance cost, and then they had a pay out of pocket cost.
Right.
And my pay out of pocket cost was cheaper than my insurance cost.
Oh, of course.
And they actually put both of these costs on the receipt. And I was like, wait a minute. Why would you pay more just to use your insurance when you don't have to? It doesn't make any sense. But then you realize that the reason for it is that it gives the pharmacy the ability to charge a higher rate for those who have insurance, to recoup some of the cost of the people who don't. And we can go back to this whole Medicare, Medicaid situation that we're dealing with right now in Congress. That is one of a lot of people's complaints, is that, wait. Those of us who have healthcare insurance through our employer, whatever it is, whoever you have it through,
right,
we're having to subsidize those who don't. So those of us that do are saying about the people that don't, it's like, well, I'm terribly sorry. I'm already paying for your health care, whether it be through my increased premiums or my tax dollars. So a lot of us are having, that lack of empathy. And we do, because we're paying twice already. Twice. So this is the result of the federal government getting involved in this. Well, they got involved with college education also.
Sure.
And
they're driving this. Yeah.
And if the federal government is saying that we're going to subsidize, or should I say, just give grants to these colleges to help fund, or should I say, fund the college itself, then what is the college going to do? Well, hold on. There's one other thing: guarantee student loans. I think that's probably the worst of the worst.
Sure.
And with the guaranteed student loans, it's like, oh, well, this is free money.
That's
and
right.
As a matter of fact, we as college institutions can just go ahead and jack up the tuition rates. As a matter of fact, we're going to build a new library and a nice new stadium and so on and so forth to cover the cost. And then the federal government is like, well, yeah, we'll go ahead and guarantee the loans. Excuse me. A school 25 years ago, and this actually is the case here, there's a local private school here in our area that when I looked at going to the school, it was $5,000 a year to go to the school. Now it's like almost $40,000 a year to go to the same school. What has changed? Nothing. Well, except for that new stadium, that new arena that they have. And, they built some new, I want to call them barracks, but they built some new dormitory buildings and stuff like that. But has the actual quality of the education gone up? Nope. The kids are dumber. They just are. But this is the reason, I should say, the result of the federal government getting involved in this stuff. And those who think that the federal government is actually the be all to end all to be all, or whatever, be all to end all. I always got that phrase mixed up. then I'm terribly sorry. You're sadly mistaken, because it's not. If anybody can come up with one thing, I think, please comment with this one. If you can come up with one thing that the federal government has got involved in that got more efficient and cheaper, please let us know. I'm waiting. I would love to hear what it is.
You know, another dynamic though, that I thought about with, because I just went to a high school reunion, and I remember some of the guys down on one end of the building, and they would have like the white outfits on because they were in the barber thing. And then, I knew some guys that were over in the masonry area, and that's what they did all day. They built stuff. There was a lot of stuff they built around campus. So the women would tend to get into the home ec stuff, or they would also get into eventually the work that they might end up being in hairdressing and things like that. So that was an option for students at the high school. And then I started to hear that all of these type of programs got ended. They were beginning to be cut.
Wow.
But I remember asking my dad once, who graduated in the 1940s from high school. I asked him, I said, discipline. He graduated with like 16 people in his graduating class, something like that. It's 1945. And I was asking him once about like what happened with the students. And he said, well, there's plenty of manual labor and there were farms. So like when you got to 14 or 15 and you were a problem, you were the hell out. That was it. I mean, they weren't waiting to 16. They just got rid of you. But you could go get a job in manual labor, construction. You could get a job, or you could get work on a farm. That was available. That's where so much of the world has changed. I remember hearing that at the turn of the 20th century, 85% of people worked for themselves, and about 15% worked for other or the government. That's literally was in 1900. So by the year 2000, 100 years later, it was like 90% work for someone else or the government, and right at 10% work for themselves. So that's a big part of the dynamic that shifted. The education piece wasn't as important to a 1921 farmer whose kid really didn't have the aptitude to make it in school. He can damn sure go out there and, handle hay fields or whatever, or pull tobacco or whatever, was the task on the farm that he had probably been doing since he was 4 anyway. It's like, go back to the farm. And the farm was at least a way to carve out a living. But when we have such a low percentage of people now in those type of jobs, there's nowhere else to go except try to get them into the workforce.
There was a show on BBC called Top Gear. It's one of my favorite shows of all time. It just is, or was. And essentially the creator of the show is a guy named Jeremy Clarkson. And Jeremy has always been very outspoken, funny guy, but he never held back on his opinions.
Right.
Well, after the Top Gear show ended, they went over to Amazon and did a show called The Grand Tour. The Grand Tour ran its course, but Jeremy still, I guess, was good with Amazon. They created another show for him called Clarkson's Farm. Whereas this guy, Jeremy Clarkson, and by the way, Jeremy Clarkson comes from money. His mother was the creator of the Berenstain Bears. Go figure. I didn't know that until a few months ago. So he comes from some money. Regardless, he decides to become a farmer. And he's going through all the trials and tribulations of a farmer in England. But this is in England, but I'm sure the same thing applies here in the United States.
It's not easy work.
It's not easy work. And I remember the last 5 or so minutes of the last episode of the first season. He's going through all his numbers and he's like, dude, you've got to be kidding me. All of this time and effort, all of the permits I had to pull, all of the fighting from the town council and so on and so forth.
And he probably didn't break even.
Barely broke even. And he's like, but we feed England. But they're running us through the ringer. He's
in
like,
spite of.
in spite of.
Yeah.
And he said, I could kind of see why there's so many people that don't want to get involved in this industry any longer because of
Can't
all of
afford
the
it.
roadblocks. Again, you can't afford it. And then take in the United States the whole inheritance tax. You may have a farmer who's living in this house that's 110 years old or whatever, 2-bedroom house with a one and a half bathrooms, and the family's been living in that house for several generations, and it's been passed on and on and on. But now, because of all the land and the equipment and everything that they own, they're millionaires. On paper, they're millionaires, but that's it. So when they
Far more than
die,
that, most likely. Yeah.
but when they die, the federal government is like, oh, well, you know what? You're over a certain threshold for a millionaire. So now you qualify, I'm going to call it that. Now you're going to be punished for the inheritance tax. And
Yeah.
if you're going to pass it on to your children, you can't do it for the fact that you don't have $500,000 just laying around because of the inheritance
You have
tax.
to, right.
You have to sell it.
Right. You have to do a lot of incredible estate planning. I think there's some ways, but yeah, I remember really becoming aware of that more so in the 80s. And that's some speaker somewhere. I remember bringing up this point because at that time, I might have been in the 90s. I guess it was post Reagan, but it was in the 90s. It went to 55%, but it was 55% over a certain number. But everything you were just saying was true. They showed where there were families. Mom, dad might have had a son or daughter that stayed on, to help with the farm, and they grew whatever, and they took it to market, whatever, and they made a profit that made life okay. So, they might have been making high 5 figures, low 6 figures back at a time that meant something. However, the farmland was worth $5.5 million. So they're making this 100 grand a year. The land for sale would go like 5.5. Then they got a bunch of farm equipment, another $500,000, blah, 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 blah. And it's exactly what you said. So then dad dies without any type of estate planning. Federal government comes in and says, okay, we think the whole operation's worth $6.3 million, whatever. Okay, so you get the shelter of, I think then $1 million per acre. So that eats up to, now you're paying 55% on the excess over. So you get a bill. So the 55%, comes to $2 million, let's say. So then you've got, 240 somethings that just lost dad in his 70s. And they're like, and mom, where the hell are we going to end up coming up with $2 million? So what they had to do, like you said, it was a lot of forced sales during that period. But to a lot of people on the street, you're like, hey, guy's got a farm worth $6.5 million. Should the government come? Hell yeah, the government should come in and get his 55%. Yeah. These people, they're living really nice, no. They make 100 grand a year after expenses. The yield of their crop gets them, 100,000 profit or whatever it was they live off of. But they think because they hear it's a $6.5 million farm as so assessed, appraised, it ought to, I remember, I don't want to misspeak here, but I'm going to try it anyway. I think there was a lot of the Cook family losing the Redskins.
Okay.
Because I remember something about Jack Kent Cooke, who was the owner when they were good through the 80s. They named a new stadium that they built in Landover. Yeah, that was the first Jack Kent Cooke stadium. Then it became the FedEx, and now it's Northwest or whatever it is now. I don't really care anymore. But there was a certain amount of, when he got into it was owned by George Preston Marshall, then the lawyer there in DC. Edward Bennett Williams ran it for a while. Then Cook became the chief operating officer. Had the greatest share of the team. So bottom line is, that's when teams were starting to go through that, jumping from the 25 million guys paid for it years ago when they were younger to $1 billion teams. So that's what happened when he died. You can imagine 55% on $1 billion. If the team gets appraised at $1 billion, I believe that was a driving force in the son having to sell the team. And that's when Daniel Snyder comes in and takes over. I think the Cook family wanted to retain the team, but it was one of those, the taxes on the team's now increased value pretty much priced them out of being able to hold on to it.
Amazing, isn't it? It's
Yeah, I
amazing.
mean, whenever that
Again,
happens, I always think it's a
w-
huge crime, especially like you said, in these situations where it's been a family-owned farm or business for years,
yeah.
and they end up losing it because they can't pay the taxes on it. But
And we're back to, can someone come up with a situation where the federal government has got their hands in it and it became cheaper and more efficient? No,
you know,
I can't.
if I look back though, I don't know. I don't know where inheritance tax in that form. I guess it was a creation of, you have the 16th Amendment in 1913 and you have the IRS. I don't believe there was any forerunner of the IRS. I think the Internal Revenue Service came about with it because you're
What do
literally
you,
getting into people. I'm saying the way the government funded itself constitutionally was through tariffs and duties and ex post and or what was it? Not ex post,
excise taxes?
excise taxes. Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't thank you.
w-
There was no income tax until 1913. All right,
Well, help me out here. Maybe I'm getting a little mixed up.
let me
Was
try
it
that.
that there was
Internal
no?
Revenue Service
Oh,
history.
oh,
I don't know. That's what I'm checking right now.
well, I'm asking a very specific question. Is it that there was no income tax, or was it there was no
1862.
withholding?
No, 1862.
That's what I was about to say. That
There
during
was no
during
okay.
the
The
Civil
Internal
War.
Revenue Service was established in 1862 to collect the first income tax in the United States,
Yeah,
primarily to fund the Civil War, but that was overturned.
yeah,
And the Supreme Court said it's not constitutional. All right, to fund the Civil War. It evolved through various reforms, including the ratification of the 16th Amendment in 1913.
right,
So it wasn't until, okay, so apparently it was formed to try to collect taxes from income, and that got overturned or struck down because they're like, you can't do it, not without a constitutional amendment. Then you get the constitutional amendment. So I don't know what it did in between that time. Overview, blah, blah, blah. 1862, the Office of the Commissioner of Internal Revenue was created to assess. 1867, the income tax was repealed due to public opposition, leading to a reliance on taxes from alcohol and tobacco.
hmm,
So I guess, well, yeah, that's the old term too. You watch the old movies, some of them black and white, and you see people with the moonshine still in the backyard, and they would refer to the revenuers.
yes,
Yeah, the government types that would come to check on them. So I guess that became, it looks like from this, that became solely their duty was to collect taxes on alcohol and tobacco.
yes,
So 1913, with the 16th Amendment, it allowed Congress to impose an income tax without apportionment among the states. This led to the creation of the Bureau of Internal Revenue.
right,
1918, the Revenue Act. So, okay, in my mind, it was 1913 it started, but you're right. It was established with this attempt at income taxation during the Civil War. There were riots over that. It was a big mess over that. And
right.
I thought it went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, again, without a constitutional amendment, you don't have the authority to tax income. And I know people that still say the 16th Amendment's not what people oh, you got that's another whole show that ought
Yeah.
to get some interest from people about what the 16th Amendment even really is. Yes, sir.
I got to change the subject here because
Yes, sir.
I wanted to bring this up. I was listening to a podcast earlier, and this certain podcast had on a guy, Robert Spalding. He was a former Air Force brigadier general and a B-2 stealth bomber pilot. Now, of course, this guy has now worked in foreign policy and intelligence, specifically concerning China. And he's a CEO of a company specializing in secure EMP, heart, and telecommunication and cloud services. And I'm listening to this guy. And pretty much from the start of the podcast, I'm a little skeptical about this dude, specifically in the way that he's talking about foreign affairs when it comes to China. But then he says a couple of things that I was like, I'm driving down the road. I'm like, okay, this guy, either he doesn't know or he's being disingenuous. One of the things he said was, well, the the federal constitution, when it comes to the military, it it mandated that we had a navy and an army. And I'm like, no, that's not true. It never said that. It only said a navy. And then he said, and the Second Amendment was there to help protect us from foreign invaders. And I'm thinking to myself, dude, how much research have you done as a brigadier general? and you don't really know a
He
lot about
really?
the format.
All
That's
right,
what
so what
exactly what
he
he said.
was okay, so all right, a view of that I could see would be will allow the people to retain their firearms so that if we are invaded by a foreign force, they'll have weapons. That would be his argument.
Yeah, but remember what he said, that the Constitution says that they're mandated to have an army and a navy.
Well, that's
They're
my
not.
reading. That's my reading that I've given many times. Clearly, it says to maintain the Navy. It
Right.
doesn't say anything other than raising armies in times of military need. But let's go right to the
Right.
language.
Well,
Let's go right to it.
that's what
Article
it
1,
says.
Section 8 of the Constitution.
Yeah, that's what it said. But here's the thing about that. Listen to where this guy is from and what he's pushing. He's saying this stuff for his own benefit. Honestly,
Sure.
if this is the world that he's in, he's pushing, I'm a hammer and everybody's a nail. No, that's not the case here. It's not. And with him saying the thing about the standing armies, no,
All
the
right.
founders were totally against a standing army. And
Well, clearly Madison was. I don't know. Maybe some of them weren't as much. Hamilton was probably just the opposite of him. I don't
uh,
really know about that. But Madison, who pretty much wrote the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, was clear. If you look at his other writings, all right, look, I want to go right to this. So we're okay. Here we go. Establish post roads, blah blah blah. To declare war, grants letters of marque and reprisal, and make rules concerning captures on land and water. Now, this is what it says. This is what it says, and I totally agree with you, brother. I think you're exactly right. The wording is to raise and support armies, not the army.
right.
Not to have the army, to raise and support armies, but no appropriation of money to that use shall be for a longer term than 2 years, meaning you can vote the bastards out that vote for an unpopular war. You can get the members of Congress out or the House. You can get the Senate out too, 1/3 of them. Then the next line is to provide and maintain a navy.
Yes.
So yeah,
And
I think that, and I've made this argument many times, and I did it with the show with the guy that was, he was your standard issue Republican guy, good guy, and he was saying clearly they would never have believed the framers that. All right, backing up, what I had said was I think that leaves under the Bill of Rights absolute authority of the Commonwealth of Virginia to regulate firearms any way you want. Virginia can do whatever they want. The guy's like, oh, no. I said, all that said in the Bill of Rights was it only applied to the federal government, that the federal government was going to allow the people to keep their weapons. What the state did in regulation of the militia and the firearms was up to the state. He didn't believe that. So then I said, at the formation of the Constitution, or at the time of the completion of the Constitution that went out for ratification, many states either tore up a constitution or wrote a new one. And I love this one, and I've mentioned it to you before. You got to read Pennsylvania, because Pennsylvania made it as clear as possible. You may maintain ownership of firearms. You want to shoot Bambi, you want to fire at targets in the backyard, home protection. Because my point I was making to this gentleman is I don't think the Second Amendment has anything to do with home protection.
okay.
None. No, all it meant to me is what Madison was saying is we can't allow some crazy who obtains certain levels of power in our government to create armies for their own purposes, or that the government has a standing army that they can send all over the place and do crazy things. Here's going to be our assurance against how Great Britain treated us by going house to house and taking our weapons. We're
Right.
going to raise the armies from the people. But it was up to the states how they formed the militias.
Yes.
Or
I agree.
you got the look. You got the look. So what
Well,
do you think?
no, I'm agreeing with all that. But the reason I even bring up any of this is because we were talking earlier about what should be and shouldn't be done, and influence. There's a lot of influence within the federal government as to
Right.
what's being done by people who are looked at as authorities within the
Sure.
federal government itself. And this guy, in just those two questions, I would love to sit down across the table with him and debate or even just not debate, talk about the formation of this country and the writing of the Constitution, because he clearly doesn't know.
Well, let me ask you
But
this. How many people you think in Congress or even the executive branch today know anything about what's actually in the Constitution?
no, I'm agreeing with you. Not very many
It's the
of
whole
them.
government.
Yeah, not very many. But this guy is being put up on a pedestal as
Sure.
to he's, some authority, when really, if you just look to the side and say, hey, man, you have an ulterior motive behind your
Sure. I'm sure.
words.
Yeah.
And the guy that, the podcast that he's on is a very popular podcast that focuses on a lot of military actions and
Mhm.
stuff like
Mhm.
that. Good guy. I think the guy who does the podcast, I think he's a good guy, but I don't think he really understands the function and formation of this country either. But to have this guy who's a general just because he was a general and he was a stealth bomber pilot, yeah, that's nice and all, but you don't really know what you're talking about. And I have a problem with what you're trying to do by saying that we have all these boogeymen out here that we have to spend money on. And by the way, I just happen to own a company that the government spends money on.
Sure.
It's like, really? How many times do we as Americans have to listen to people like this, whether it be people outside of the government or Lindsey Graham and his
Mhm.
girlfriend, John McCain. Sorry, that's just how I look at it. Who had never seen a war that they didn't think needed to be fought. This general is the same way. How much money are we spending on this stuff? How much money are we spending on this boogeyman of China? I don't believe China, and it's one of the things that really irritated me about this guy. He's saying that yes, we most certainly know that China is going to try to take over Taiwan, and we need to be there and support Taiwan. And I'm thinking to myself, how? First of all,
Okay.
why?
Okay.
Why?
He's revealed. Okay. With all of that level or line of thinking, he's revealing who he is. He's revealed what team he plays for. The fact that he then misquotes a fair assessment of Madison, the formation of the Second Amendment, and how it all fits into the Constitution. It's all theater again. It's back to, gosh, I've used this one about 27 times since I started podcasting. It's back to the Milley thing. Milley's a Princeton graduate, a 4-star general. He's on the chair. Well, I don't know if he was chairman at the time, but he was on the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And when asked a question about all the DE, not so much the DE, well, it's definitely the race stuff. I want to get in touch with my white guilt or my white rage or some bullshit or whatever. And then he makes the statement that I have to remember in all of this study and basically indoctrination of the troops, I have to remember we live in a country that was founded on the premise that a black person was 3/4 human. He's
Yeah, I remember that.
African American. Okay, Charles, that's still, I'm using it again to say, I can't believe a Princeton graduate doesn't understand the 3/5 compromise. How you miss the fraction. You don't know the fraction, and you don't know the purpose of the 3/5 compromise. That it was the abolitionists that didn't want the South to have representation of their
Right.
slaves to get greater numbers of members of Congress in the House. I don't understand. I mean, I can't fathom that. And with a straight face, goes, well, the Constitution defined an African American as 3/4 of a human. Really?
No, it
First of
didn't.
all, again, so if you're then telling me that some other dumbass is out here selling all the wars because he profits off of them and he's misquoting the basis of the Second Amendment, I really don't hear, and again, it's my opinion for what it's worth, but I really think everybody misses the point of the Second Amendment, like all the time, including the right winger guy that I had on that was a beautiful guy. He was for guns and butter and all that kind of stuff. And the Heller decision, which was the federal district, it was the District of Columbia. He goes, oh, they absolutely got it right that the Supreme Court ruled that you have a God-given right to have a firearm for home protection. I don't think it's that at all. I wasn't against the decision. I wasn't against it, but I think that ain't what it's about. But again,
No,
that's yeah.
this guy is using fear
Sure.
um,
Sure.
as the catalyst for him making money, and he's going on to his podcast and he's spouting this stuff, and I'm like, again, I would love to sit across the table from him, as I would be able to shoot pretty much every one of his points down just by asking, what evidence do you have to prove that this is the intentions of a foreign country. I just don't.
No,
I mean,
I'm
you
sure
don't
you're
have
not
it.
right.
And
But
it's people like that that are really dangerous. And we go back to not having money for certain things. This guy is
why?
part of the reason that we don't have money for certain things because it's being
Yeah,
wasted
I don't
on.
disagree. But hey, why did 9/11 happen? Because there's people around the world that hate you for your freedoms.
There's just the stupidest thing.
Remember that?
Yes, I
Remember
remember
that?
that. It was so
And they
dumb.
hate you. You ever watch Sean Hannity?
Yes. Yeah.
Sean, he pushed that point out. They hate you because of
Yep.
your constitution and your religion and your freedoms and all that. That those people hate you. They
It's so
sold it pretty
stupid.
well. I mean, yeah, I mean it's been sold at different points throughout history.
Yeah.
What any of this stuff means. Yeah. Well, and another one that just popped in my mind. I always thought, man, I get it. I get it. I get it because again, I think that when it comes to measurable innate intelligence, Bill Clinton is like super, super duper smart. I don't think there's any question about it. He's like crazy smart. But I remember that thing in the 90s when he said, "Hey, yeah, there's separation of church and states right there in the Constitution." And he taught constitutional law and he went to Yale Law School.
Hmm.
Separation of church and state is not in the Constitution. It is a reference to a letter that Thomas Jefferson
Right.
wrote to the Danbury Baptist. You know that story. But people miss it. In the First Amendment, there was an establishment clause and a free exercise clause. And the establishment clause, what they were driving at is there would not be a church of the United States as there was a Church of England.
Yes.
The
That's
Catholic
all it was
Church,
saying.
that's all it was saying.
Yeah.
And at the time, and I believe I'm correct on this, there were like 6 states that were taxing their people to support the churches.
Right.
So they clearly weren't saying that the Commonwealth of Virginia or Maryland or whoever couldn't tax their people to support religion or church. And then
Right.
the free exercise was we're not going to get into what you can worship and not worship. It's just that simple. Now, does that set up what Jefferson was alluding to? Sort of a system of understanding that there was a separation of church and state. Church and state, I think so. I think that is a fair reading, but not religion. It didn't mean that Congress couldn't open with prayer. It didn't mean certain other
Yeah.
things as to a recognition of things that were considered, you know, religious. It just there wouldn't be a one church. It wouldn't be a church in the United States. That's basically what it was. The states can hack it out however they want to.
I
Seriously, yeah.
always, and I'm looking it up right now. I always love the actual official name of a certain state. It's one that I found. I just love the name of it. And I'm looking it up right now.
You're going to say Delaware.
No.
Okay, not Delaware, not Rhode
The
Island.
state, yeah, actually it's Rhode Island.
It is Rhode Island. How the
State
hell
of
did I know
Rhode
that?
Island and Providence Plantations. That is the official name of well, actually was of Rhode Island. I
Really?
thought it was beautiful, a
Why
beautiful
did
name.
when did they dump the rest?
Hold on, let's see here. When did they dump the rest? November 3rd, 2020. The state's voters approved an amendment to the state constitution, formally dropping and Providence Plantations from its full name. Yep. Yeah, I
All
always
this
love that.
time. Oh my gosh, you are
Yeah,
so all over the obscure. I love that.
yeah.
The full
If you,
official name of Rhode Island is the state of Rhode Island and Providence Plantations. However, in 2020, voters approved the amendment to drop
yep.
the "and" Providence. I had
If
never heard that story. Holy cow, that is amazing.
anyone who remembers back in the 90s, the late 90s, when they started issuing those state quarters,
Yeah.
that's where I
Yeah.
first saw it. I was like,
Ah,
wow,
okay.
that's interesting. And it's on those state quarters, the official name, obviously until 2020. Yeah. Yeah. But
So what did they mean by that?
well, because Rhode Island really was a religious state. It
Mhm.
was.
Mhm.
And they were pretty strict when it came to how religion, I should say adamant as to how religion interact or was intertwined with the goings on of the government of Rhode Island. They really were. But you know what? That's the way the Constitution was written, because it gave each individual state to do pretty much whatever they wanted to do, so long as it didn't didn't violate rights. Now, by the way, I meant to bring this up a few minutes ago.
Mm-hmm.
You were talking about the Second Amendment in the general that I was talking about earlier,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Spalding. He was talking about the Second Amendment, and he was talking about standing armies. And this is something that a lot of people really get wrong. They really do. A right is something that does not require any labor from someone else for you to exercise. That's a right. A privilege is something that requires other people's labor for you to participate in. It is a privilege for you to drive. It is a privilege for you technically to go to school and so on and so forth. It is a right to defend yourself. It is a right for you to worship.
All right, what about travel?
So I would say that you do have a right to go from point A to point B.
Then why is it a privilege
Yeah.
to drive?
Because it's just a mode of travel, and you can go out and walk all day long.
But why is it so you think it's like a natural in the natural law?
Yes.
Governments can regulate who gets on the highway.
Yes. Yeah, because the government actually.
What if it's
Sorry,
privately
libertarians.
owned?
I was about to say that. No,
Okay.
I was
All
literally
right.
about to say that.
Tell me.
The government that you're a prosecutor.
Mhm.
If I decide to drive down the interstate doing 100 miles an hour and I get pulled over, this trooper's gonna be like, yeah, you're going to jail. Okay. But if I decide to build a road in my own private property and I go 100 miles an hour, does the state trooper have any jurisdiction to come and give me a ticket or arrest me on my own private property? No, they don't. They don't. No state funds were used to build that road on my private property. So long as I don't leave my private property, I'm okay.
Wait a minute. All right, let me think about this.
Okay. Well, while you're thinking about it, I will say as a kid,
you gotta have a lot
little
of land.
kid, I remember going hunting with my father and his hunting club and stuff like that. It was routine for me as a 9-year-old to get behind the wheel of the truck and drive that truck all around the 3,000 acres with no issue. Wasn't worried about the game warden or anybody like that, because it was private property. I could not go into the road, a public road, and do that. But on private property, I could do that. So with that said, do I think that that it's a right to travel? Yes. You can walk between point A and point B.
I see the distinction you're making, but you're saying if you're going to get on a public highway, which is maintained by the state and they have jurisdiction, then you're calling it a privilege to travel upon it.
Yes, a privilege. Yeah.
Can you get a DUI on your own private land?
No.
Yeah, you can.
And then I have a problem with that.
You could have a problem with it, but they are written.
I know.
I mean, yeah.
No,
because what it is actually in the Commonwealth of Virginia, what they're charging you with is the operation of a motor vehicle. You could be drunk behind the wheel with the heater on, and you're not even you don't even have the car started, and you could get a DUI. There have been cases where that's happened, where the police have showed up on a call and they find somebody and they're intoxicated in a vehicle. They're not even moving, but they're in the vehicle, and it could still be charged with DUI, even if it's on private property. If you catch them, because if you're in the parking lot at Burger King, you're not on a public highway. And there's all kinds of case law on I've seen cases where a condo association parking lot was one thing. If it was a townhouse, it was something else. Like in the parking lot, whether it was considered a highway for that purpose or a public highway for that purpose. It's crazy. There's crazy laws when it comes to that. Okay. But you don't want you want everybody to think that driving's a privilege. Okay.
Well, really, I'm talking about rights versus privileges. Yeah. And again, I go back to a right is something that doesn't require someone else's labor for you to exercise. A privilege is something that you do that requires somebody else's labor, such as build the road. Okay. That's pretty much the difference between the two. And it didn't seem like this guy understood the difference between the two. You have a right to defend yourself. Now, the means that you use to defend yourself kind of sort of depending on you. And Tim Pool says this all the time. And yes, he's taken it to an extreme. What is the term? Reducto in absurdum. And he says he will ask a gun rights advocate, do you have the right to a nuclear bomb? And usually they say, no, of course not. And he said, well, when the Constitution was formed, the citizens were afforded the right to have all of the same weapons that the military had, which is why there were so many private frigates out there. Essentially, military ships had, however many guns on them. They were owned by private people, not the government. Well, now things have gotten so convoluted that I can no longer own a Browning automatic rifle unless I go through, jump through all kinds of hoops, for it and so on and so forth. Yeah, did he take it to the extreme? Yes, but he was just trying to make a point that to say that people don't have the right to defend themselves by using
right
firearms.
Under the Second Amendment, wait a minute, right under the Second Amendment or God-given right?
Right under the Second Amendment.
Because, I actually heard somebody discuss this, the terminology that was used. Like they would refer to bombs and things like that as ordinances.
Yes, right.
And so the specialist I heard, he goes, one of the things that really pisses me off is when I hear people say, well, you can, based on the Second Amendment, you can only have a musket, not an M4 rifle or something like that. And he goes,
they never said that.
Well, but they said arms.
Right.
And he goes, and that was a term of art that meant something to them. So when somebody brings out like the Tim Pool, well, can you have a nuclear bomb? It'd be like, not based on the Second Amendment, you can't.
Well, hold on. But when it was written, it said arms, and that included the arms that the military had, whatever the military had.
All right.
The citizens.
I'm with you, but again, the guy that I'm hearing say this is saying a term of art like ordinances went to certain types of things that went boom, not firearms that projected rounds down chamber. This is what his argument was. So they meant firearms. To keep and bear arms shall not be infringed did not mean you could have other things.
I got to disagree with the guy because
I'm for you having a nuclear bomb. You can have you can have all kinds of things. I don't care. I'm just saying, if we're going to be fair to the terms of art in the language, they did not say that repeating rifles were excluded, because they were beginning to flirt with the repeating firearms, and they wouldn't have thought that that was something excluded. But they meant, okay.
No, but the guy who's even saying this, no, he's wrong. And the reason that he's wrong, I just gave you an example of, it was okay for a private citizen to have a ship with cannons. It had
nothing to do with the Second Amendment.
Oh, hold on. Actually, it did. That's the whole point. So.
I don't think that Madison, I swear to brother, I don't think Madison thought at all like, hey, and let me also include, the right to keep and bear arms and have a very large ship out back on the water.
Then why was it allowed?
It could have been allowed because it wasn't addressed in any other way.
No.
But it wasn't a Second Amendment protection. Something not being a Second Amendment protection doesn't mean you can't have it.
Dude, I have to disagree with you on that one, man.
The Second Amendment, really do. Right, does the Second Amendment cover a swing set out front of your house? Can you have a swing set out front of your house?
If someone is coming at me and I'll use my swing set to catapult myself onto that person's head, then yes, it does.
All right. Okay. But you think it's covered by the Second Amendment? I don't think it is.
I think that it is whatever means that you use to defend yourself. Well, I shouldn't just say defend. And that's the issue that I have, by the way. We're going off into the weeds here, but this is the issue I have with this guy. This is what we're supposed to do. Yeah. Okay. That he didn't understand that really, because he kept saying the Second Amendment is there for you to defend yourself. And I'm thinking, that's just part of it. The other part was the Second Amendment was there to
make sure
protect yourself. Yes, to ensure there are no standing armies, but also if a certain group of people in a place that used to be a square that's no longer a square, that's in between Virginia and Maryland, decided to go rogue, that it was our duty to
that's
not allow them to happen.
Well, that's an aspect of the no standing armies, that the bad guys that went rogue wouldn't have an army to play with.
Yes, they wouldn't have an. Okay. Don't you think it's a twofold thing though? That's just part of it. The other part was, and I go back to, if you're a hammer, you see nothing but nails.
Well, look, there's no doubt that James Madison, the peripheral language around the Second Amendment was we could get a despot, it could go rogue, and damn right the people should be able to defend themselves against a tyrannical government. There's no question about that. No.
Yes.
But I think he thought the key to tamping down that urge by bad people is they don't have an army to play with. Literally, I think that's what he thought, because he gave all these examples, or other historians have given examples of kings that have kind of gone haywire. They start to build their own armies and their own gold reserves or whatever, so they start doing all this accumulation of wealth and armies so they can go screw around or put down insurrection, as they want to call it. The people are getting restless. Well, at least I got my army. That's one of the things that, think about it. If you're in the old school 19th and early 20th century, wanting to, or even further back, you want to kind of take over a place. What better than getting a lot of people with rifles on your side, right?
Yes. Okay, I got to go a little bit further in history, though. A little bit further.
Go for it.
So I'm just gonna tell the story of one of the most interesting things that I had ever. Let's just say when it happened to me, it was interesting, and I was just like, oh, wow. So I'm walking through the Roman Forum in Rome, and have a tour guide.
It's a good place for it.
And yes, and we have a tour guide, and we stop at this little building, and the building just kind of looks like a shack or shed that was only covered. The top and the back was covered, and had this mound on the inside of it, and there's all kinds of flowers and money and notes thrown on this mound. And we stopped there, and I'm looking at the tour guide. I was like, okay, what's that? And she's like, oh, that was where Julius Caesar was cremated.
Oh my.
And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of sort of what I was like. Well, I was like, holy shit. Okay, it really hit me where I was when she said that. Now I have to, and I'm talking about Julius Caesar when it comes to this. Anyone who knows anything about Jeeps, the simple Wrangler Jeeps or whatever, there's this Jeep called, I guess you say model, called a Rubicon.
I remember
and most people, people have heard the term, crossing Rubicon, but do you actually know where it comes from? So during this time in Roman history, it was illegal for someone to bring an army within Rome proper. And the coming from the west, the border was the Rubicon River. And Julius Caesar had his own army, just like Pompey and other guys. They had their own armies. But Julius Caesar pretty much had beaten all those guys. And now he's going towards Rome. And he's going towards Rome because he's like, Rome is, they're not doing what they should be doing. They need a strong hand to bring Rome back to its former glory. And I'm pretty much going to do it. Now, he was convinced by other people to do it. They asked him to do it. But he's at the Rubicon River. And he's saying, if you cross this river, it's the point of no return. That's kind of sort of where Jeep comes up with the name Rubicon, because it can go to places that they can go past the point of no return and be confident in doing it. So he crosses the river, and well, the rest is history. But one of the things about that time period was how the armies were created and funded. They were private armies, and they fought for the state. And in this case, they fought for the Roman Empire. But the armies were a lot of times funded by the spoils of war itself. And another piece of history here, when it comes to, you look at modern military uniforms, we have ribbons on the uniforms to signify achievements and so on and so forth.
Right.
That came about because they didn't want to have to pay the soldiers any longer. So instead of giving them the money for their achievements and stuff, the spoils of war, is like, we're going to keep the spoils, and we're going to give you this ribbon as a decoration for your uniform to say that you actually contributed to this. But we're going to keep all the money for ourselves. That's what happened. Well, I think that the founders were like, look, we cannot have these standing armies for the fact that the last thing we want is for someone to become another Julius Caesar. And was it Posse Comitatus, that act that essentially said that that federal government troops are not supposed to, kind of like the CIA, not supposed to have any. I shouldn't say just like
I'll tell you
CIA, but
exactly
they're
what
not
it
supposed
said.
to. Okay,
It was
thank
following. It was following Reconstruction,
Mhm.
and it had the 12 military districts. And so basically, who played law enforcement were the Union Army. The Union
Yeah.
Army was playing. So there were. This was the compromise. It was the Samuel Tilden and Rutherford B. Hayes, the Hayes-Tilden election, where it came down to Florida. One of the parties needed all 20 electoral votes. The other one just needed one more, and it all went to Hayes. So it was a compromise. They had a board put together to decide the election of 1876. So the South wanted concessions. This is what led to the Jim Crow laws and everything else. And this is what basically, when they pulled the military districts out with the end of Reconstruction, the South asked for certain concessions. And yeah, we'll let you have your Hayes as president. Rutherford B. Hayes will be the president, not Samuel Tilden. We'll concede the Electoral College and the rest. Oh, and by the way, get the troops out. And then as another part of this whole congressional act was to write a law saying from now on, you can't put U.S. military troops in the street to play cop. But as I've said, the thing that concerns me, as well as, I mean, I get where that was going. It doesn't say anything about the cops being the military. And the flip side of it, because I remember a kid where I was teaching, he's all giddy because he's interning at a local law enforcement. He goes, Mr. Moore, we just got a tank. We just got a tank. And I'm like, whoa, you do what? Yeah, we got a drug interdiction tank. You know, we can go out now and knock walls down. I'm like, whoa, what are you telling me? So some military surplus tank the local sheriff's office now had. And you look at the type of weapons they're using. And when you hear, like, there was always the famous shootout. What was it? 2 guys that robbed the banks in LA.
Yeah, North Hollywood shootout, bank robbery
Exactly.
shootout. Yeah.
And that was always, well, then the law enforcement certainly needs the same firepower, as if, you know, okay, well, I mean, you can argue that. But there has been, and you started to notice post 9/11, what did they begin to do? More federalized local law enforcement.
Yeah, militarization, honestly.
Exactly. And then it's all under the umbrella of Homeland Security. And I don't know. What is that whole thing about? The only leader that ever used that kind of homeland type of language was.
Well, nope.
Wasn't him.
I've used this one. I've said this before.
Yeah.
The Soviets call it the motherland.
Okay.
The Nazis call it the fatherland, and we're calling it the homeland.
Oh, okay. So we just brought it all. We got mommy and daddy in the house together.
Yeah.
Just call it home. All right. Okay. Yep. Well, I'm glad that we tied that up and figured that one out too. But yes. So but that's been my concern. The Posse Comitatus Act was 1860, or it would have been 1878, I think. Posse Comitatus Act. Of course, it doesn't understand that at all. It didn't even come close. No, it actually did come close. Here we go. Federal law, 18 USC section 1385, original act signed 1878 by Rutherford B. Hayes, that limits the use of federal military personnel to enforce domestic law by the federal government or other government entities such as county sheriffs and justices of the peace. Congress passed the law to an Army appropriations bill following the end of construction and was updated in 1956, 1981, and 2021. Interesting. The act originally applied only to the U.S. Army, but now in subsequent amendments in 56 expanded to its scope to the Air Force. 2021, the Natural Defense Authorization Act of fiscal year 2022 further expanded the scope to the United States. Wow. Navy, Marine Corps, and Space Force. So up until that point, the Navy could land, they could pull a ship up on your yard. If you got a waterway, Marine Corps could come for sure. The act does not prevent the Army National Guard or Air Force National Guard under state authority from acting in a law enforcement capacity. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. Oh, here we go. History. The act, boom, boom, boom. It was a response to the subsequent prohibition of the military occupation of the former Confederate States by the United States Army during the 12 years of Reconstruction following the American Civil War. The U.S. Constitution places primary responsibility for the holding of elections in the hands of the individual states. The maintenance of peace, conduct of orderly elections, blah, blah, blah. So it was, I wanted to find exactly why. The original Posse Comitatus Acts referred exclusively to the Army. We've already covered that. So, yeah, but it was in response to ending the crazy election of 1876. It was a pivotal point in American history.
Okay. So I remember having this discussion with someone.
Mm-hmm.
More than likely, the people who are listening to this podcast or watching this podcast are familiar with the movie Glory.
Oh, yeah.
And so I would probably say that is probably one of the most famous Civil War units, at least that I can think of, honestly. And maybe, Civil War units. So that was the 54th Massachusetts. And if you look at pretty much all of the units during and before that time, they were state units. They weren't federal units. So, and I just learned this not too long ago, there's a difference between the U.S. Army and the Army of the United States. There's a difference. There's a legal difference between the two. And prior to 1916, there was no, pretty much there was no Army of the United States. Now, I may get some of this mixed up. Again, I haven't done a whole lot of research on it.
Right.
I'm sure I could be fact checked on this, but anyway, the reason I bring up the 54th Massachusetts, it has to do with the Posse Comitatus. So it says that federal troops can't do that. But what if the troops were raised from the state? Essentially National Guard units that weren't federalized.
It just said that. Yeah, it just said that. It doesn't preclude that at all.
Okay. And again, we're back to people who don't understand the difference between a National Guard unit and a federal unit. And until that National Guard unit is federalized, they can go and pretty much do whatever they want within the state. Pretty much. They can enforce laws and so on and so forth. It's up until that point that the president says, I'm going to federalize that unit. Now, they can't do anything now. They can't do all the stuff that they did yesterday, today, because now they're under the federal orders.
All right. So I just looked up. This gives a pretty good explanation. The Army of the United States was one of the four major service components of the United States Army.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Today, the Army consists of regular Army, Army National Guard, the National Guard while in service of the United States, and the United States Army Reserve. Previously, however, the Army of the United States was a component. However, the Army of the United States has been inactive since suspension of the draft.
Yes.
So I guess this gets into, like, if you watch a lot of the Vietnam War movies, including Platoon, and I remember seeing it too in the movie with Robin Williams, where he played Good Morning Vietnam.
Yeah.
They would refer a lot of times in disparaging ways, regular Army.
Yeah.
He's a regular.
Yep.
Because most of the people were drafted.
Yes. They knew that those people who were regular Army essentially were going down the career path versus the people who were drafted that were only there temporarily.
Right. And I think that's this distinction with that end of the draft. Those soldiers that, but for being drafted, certainly didn't want to have anything to do with it and didn't want to be there. Right. Some clearly they served admirably and heroically, but that was that kind of tension between the people who were like choosing for an Army career versus the one that just got drafted.
Yeah. Well, I have to go back to the whole state units versus federal units. It was up until World War I think that's pretty much where they abolished the state nomenclature, if you want to call it that, of Army units. I think it was a New York unit that was one of the last ones that actually held on to its state identification. And then after that, it pretty much went to all the system that we have right now when it comes to Army identification of units.
Right.
Yeah. It's we're going down a path where things are gravitating upward versus downward when it comes to the military. And I have an issue with that because it wasn't supposed to be that way. I will say that I do like the changing of the name of the Department of Defense back to the Department of War, because
Yeah.
now we're going back to the actual function of the department itself. And I remember reading, you know, hold on, I'm going to look this up.
Yeah, there was a lot of weeping and gnashing of teeth, but I think you're right. That was a return to what now was it historically from the time of Washington considered
Yes.
the Department of War? I know it
Yep.
was during the American Civil War.
So when I thought about this in reading a very famous book written by a guy named Eric Blair in the 1940s. Oh, Eric Blair's his pen name was George Orwell. So and he wrote this really famous book about what it was going to be like in this year 1984. And there were 4 ministries in the book 1984. And the ministries were named as a diversion as to what their actual intents were. And the first one was the Ministry of Truth. They were the ones that essentially did all of the censoring and stuff like that. Responsible for news, entertainment, education, and the arts. And in practice, it fabricated propaganda, rewrites historical records, and alters fact to align with the party's narrative, ensuring Big Brother is never wrong. That's the Ministry of Truth. The second was the Ministry of Peace. Oversees matters of war and military operations. It perpetuates endless conflict and maintains social control and justify the regime's austerity. That's kind of sort of when you think about the Ministry of Defense.
Wow.
The Ministry of Love handles law and order, including surveillance, torture, and brainwashing. It enforces loyalty through fear with facilities like Room 101 used for psychological breaking of dissidents. And the last one was the Ministry of Plenty. Manages economic affairs, rationing, and production. It falsifies statistics to portray abundance while enforcing scarcity to keep the population dependent and subdued. Now, anyone who hasn't read 1984, shame on you. Really, shame on you. It was clearly a warning as to what could possibly happen in 1984, written in the 1940s. It was supposed to be a warning, but some people are using it as a guidebook, as a playbook, really, to do what's happening right now. And if someone plans on reading 1984, I just suggest you read the appendix first and then go into the book.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
That's a really big question. And we're going to end on that for our 2 hours we've been on. That's another one of those I question all the time and think about. Do some of the forces stumble into an absolute, almost as if they're following a blueprint of what Orwell and Huxley with the Brave New World, like, are they just following this because they read it and they're on board with making it actually play out? Or are they just forces that stumble into their ideology and do what they do, and these guys with vision and foresight just saw it coming?
I think that it's a case of those who read the Communist Manifesto and look at it as, yeah, I think that'll work. I really think that'll work, when actually it doesn't work. Orwell and Huxley wrote what could happen if we continue going down the path that we're going. It was more of a prediction versus what Engels
But somebody
and Marx.
wants it.
I think somebody wants it because they realize as to, well, specifically when it comes to how Big Brother in 1984 was able to control his population through propaganda and fear and so on and so forth. And what Orwell did is just essentially look at human nature.
All right.
That's all he did. When you have, was it power corrupts absolutely and absolute power corrupts absolutely? I'm sure I got that wrong. Anyway,
power corrupts and absolute power corrupts.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying, remember the chick that the Biden administration put out with kind of the wild eyes, and she was going to be that director, and then she couldn't be,
Yes.
or wasn't. Okay. Of the truth serum or the truth ministry or whatever. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. What I'm asking is, okay, you look like when she did the things where she videotaped herself doing what she did, doing a jingle like a Mary Poppins thing or whatever. Remember, there was some weirdness there, but
I remember that.
So what I'm asking though is, with these people, do they not realize when they make the statements they make, they sound like a bad scene in 1984? It's my question. Like, do they?
Yeah.
They do realize it, and they're on board with that.
I think that they realize it mainly because 1984 used to be required reading in schools. It is no longer.
You don't think these people are aware of it?
Exactly.
Now that may be true. So but here, I guess here's my whole point. I'm not doing a really good job of asking the question or setting it up. What I'm saying is, do you think that they're at all aware that they are these characters from these dystopian novels?
Yes, I do.
You think they do know it?
Yeah, I really do. And
I don't know, because I mean, when I look at their eyes and when I hear that young lady speak when she did, I think she is, in her mind, absolutely justified in her thoughts that this is the right thing to do.
Well, the party members in 1984 thought the same thing.
That's what I'm saying. But this is what I'm saying. This is what I'm saying. I think if I showed her 1984 in that moment, say, hey, look, you're sounding like what was written in a book to warn the world about you. I don't know that she would see that and go, oh, shit, I do sound like that.
No,
I'm saying not. She is that.
She's not going to say that because it's for the greater good. It doesn't really matter.
All right. Okay. All right.
Now, I do. I'm agreeing with you. I really am.
I know you're agreeing with me, but the point I'm making is, I think these people that wrote these books based upon, we may end up with this because this is human nature.
Yeah.
And then I would think that most of us read it in our formative years. It was a, hey, don't become that. Don't let this happen kind of thing. And I think all these people were exposed to it. But then when they're actually being that and playing it out in front of the public, I don't know that they're aware of what it looks like, what it sounds like. And again, I don't know sometimes when there is a particular person on The View that I won't mention a name, but you know, the films were brought out to juxtapose these positions, and it was like, hey, Roe versus Wade got turned over. I'm going to tell you what, it's my body, bitch. I get to do it. Oh, yeah, blah, blah, blah. Then they show the video of, you don't want to take the vaccine? How about screw you and your freedom? How about, so it's the same person saying it.
Yeah.
And on the one hand, they're talking about, autonomy of body and all this, and, as it relates to, as they call it, reproductive rights. But then turns around and says, no, you will be jabbed, bitch. You're going to get this because I say my health, and because I believe this is attached to my level of health. I don't care about your rights or whatever. So they're saying the same thing, but now it's, it's cliche, it's a bumper sticker, but it all of a sudden becomes like, your body, your choice. Bullshit. Not when it comes to this thing. So it's in those moments I'm like, do they hear themselves? Speak to me.
I know they hear themselves, but for them,
but they think they're justified.
The end justifies the means. Honestly, that's how they feel.
And go ahead. Don't get me wrong. I do think that it is conceivable that you hold the position that there's an absolute right to terminate, babies in your womb, and at the same time think it's also your right to force or it is the government's authority naturally held to force somebody into a vaccine for the public good. I mean, it's possible to
Yes.
think those two things.
Well, because think about it. The same people think that pretty much the planet is overcrowded. So the killing of kids, okay, whatever. It's the same thing to them. It just is. And I truly believe that they know what they're doing. I truly believe that. And with them knowing what they're doing, it's okay because it's for the greater good. It's just okay. And it is straight out of the Ministry of Truth.
Right.
From 1984. It's straight out of there.
Yeah, that's still where I'd be back to with our young lady that could have been that quote unquote Ministry of Truth, or she would have been what was her position? Director of the Ministry of Truth or whatever.
Yeah.
The way she delivered certain messages, I do think she was a true believer. And that is part of the indoctrination that goes on in the colleges. It's this whole, it's this argued appeal to authority. You got to have certain number of letters or certain letters behind your name. You have to be of a certain field. You have to, you have to be of certain training to speak on issues, no matter how batshit crazy it is, the things you say. It's okay because, well, the guy is a scientist, for God's sake. And
are you a party member? It's all that matters. Are you a party member, and what's your party member number?
Is Fauci a member of the party?
Yes.
Okay. He's also a deity in the eyes of some.
Yeah, because his number is so high up in the party.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Because I did find it interesting. The things that were unearthed were just beautiful. So I found it interesting that during the vaccine thing, somebody pulls up a video and he's on a morning talk show. He's on I think it was regional. I think it was in a particular city or some part of the country, not national. And it's like 1997, 2007. It's some other time prior to COVID. And he's on there and he's pushing the vaccine or the flu shot. He's pushing the flu shot. And this woman calls in. He goes, "Hey, Dr. Fauci, so good to talk to you. You're such a hero of mine. So, by the way, Doc, my daughter just recovered from the flu. Does she need to take the flu shot?" And he goes, "Hell no. What, are you kidding me? Come on. No, she had the flu. She's got natural immunity, for God's sake. Come on now. You don't need no shot, So he says it like that. So somebody unearths this, and it's just fascinating. He goes, "Come on here. Come on. He has natural immunity. You've heard of that, right?" So then you fast forward to post 2020. There's no such thing as natural immunity. That's the stuff that I always find fascinating. That
yes, I agree with you.
These people say these things.
They say these things, and they say it because they know that the education system that we have in place right now has pretty much done its job by keeping people ignorant and distracted. That's why I can get away with it. It's really why I can get away with it. Fauci can't, and people like him can't go to someone who's actually spent some time trying to inform themselves and say the things that he said, because every time he did that, he pretty much got it shoved back in his face. Like, I'm not going for that. But those who are running around the pasture sheep, he could get them to do pretty much whatever he wanted to get them to do because we're back to the Ministry of Truth.
All right, I'll close on this one. Sure. Because it happened to me in real time, face to face. Like I said, working at a particular college, I had a colleague going by his door. I'm with another colleague, and he has a picture in the middle of everything that's going on with the vaccine. He has a drawing. It's a cartoon, and the cartoon clearly has a petrified person, scared to death, folding up, trying to protect their vital organs, and a person with a needle, 4 feet in length, like going into their arm with a dripping needle going in. That's the imagery. And it says, "Mandate ... We didn't think we'd have to mandate. We didn't think you were that stupid."
Mm-hmm.
Mandate ? We didn't think we'd have to mandate. We didn't think you were that stupid. So I looked at my colleague and I'm like, man, that from one of the professors here on a hallway where we have several professors. how do we know? This is exactly what I said in the moment. How do we know one of our students here doesn't have a dad working at the shipyard that was forced to take the vaccine and said, because of whatever reason, I'm not, and just got fired? I would absorb that if I'm the student as that professor just called my dad stupid. Right. So I'm like, yeah, it could be offensive. And, I just think there's some issues there. So she says, basically, she calls me a name and says, well, big guy, why don't you take him up? Why don't you confront him with it? And I'm like, yeah, you know what? You're right. You're right. So he's going by my office. I said, hey, nicest guy on earth, and I didn't see the side prior to what we went through after 2020. So I said, hey, can I talk to you? I said, hey, what are we after with the message here? Oh, I'm sorry, what was that? I was like, what are we after? And it was like, I just think it's very important that for public health, safety and health, I think it's important that everybody gets okay. But you're saying those that don't are stupid? No. I never implied that at all. I'm like, really? Let me read this back to you, okay?
All right.
Didn't think we'd have to mandate. Didn't think you were that stupid. So am I missing something? He goes, well, no, I never meant that to be offensive to anyone. I'm like, all right. So I give him the example. So let's say your M1A1 student's coming down the hall to see professor at the end of the hall, walks by your door and sees this imagery, right? And says to himself, hey, my dad wouldn't take it and he got fired over it. We don't have income in the house now because dad took a stand against the regime. And I said, what about that kid? Do you think that might be a problem that he walks by and sees this image on the door and with this slogan? Oh, well, I certainly do, but I just don't think it's offensive. But if it could be offensive, I don't mind taking it down, whatever. So let me ask you this too, because then we get into a little bit of discussion about the vaccine itself. And I said, what about those that have already had it and have natural immunity? And he looks at me and says, I don't think that applies here.
It's so crazy.
And I'm like, so you think if this is a virus, however this thing's been engineered, you don't think those that have had it, survived it, and passed it have not acquired some level of natural immunity? He goes, no, I don't think that applies here. I think you're really going to still need to get the vaccine. And I'm like, can you think of any other instance where that was true? So I tell my other friend who's also in the science field, like, wait a minute, he said that? I said, yeah. Said that he didn't know if there was such thing as natural immunity as it related to this particular virus. And then I thought, wow. But I looked in his eyes as it was happening, and I realized I was questioning religious tenets. I was attacking, the gospel of whatever this is. And you could tell he was really shaken by, what do I say now? Because I don't know. There seemed to be a certain recognition of he might be making sense. And damn it. Where do I stay on the script or do I not stay on the script? I know this. I'm supposed to stay on the script. So what do we want to say in closing, Charles?
Question everything.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Every single thing. And if people are telling you not to question it, then they move to the top of the list of people who need to be questioned.
Yeah. No doubt. All right. Love you, brother. Appreciate everything. We'll be doing other shows. So if you like what we do here, like and subscribe. It's moretoconsider.com. You can just go that on a regular Google search. And also we're on X live today. Yes. We're on Rumble, on YouTube. Check us out. Please leave us comments. Thank you so much for being here. Take care. Your broadcast has been saved.